is Michelle Harton and I'm a Principal Inspector from the Working Environment team at SafeWork New South Wales. With me today I have State Inspector Mark Moscovich, also from the Working Environment team, who will be assisting with this session.
Thanks, Michelle, and hello everybody. Thanks for coming along to this presentation. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. I'd also like to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present at this webinar today. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Mark. SafeWork New South Wales is providing this online service to assist New South Wales businesses who want to learn more about mould at their workplace. As mentioned before, Mark and I are inspectors with SafeWork New South Wales and we'll be delivering this presentation in line with the work health and safety legislation and what we would expect businesses to implement at their workplace to minimise mould contamination. Our focus is on the actions you can take as a business to identify and control mould contamination at the workplace. This session aims to assist businesses prevent mould from occurring, and if this is not possible, find mould at their workplace and once found, clean any mould safely. Today's webinar has four main components. We'll provide some background information about the floods that occurred in New South Wales in 2022, causing mould issues, along with some basic knowledge about mould, such as what it is, how it gets into the human body, and some health problems caused by mould. We'll provide information on how to prevent mould occurring in the first instance, and if this is not possible, for example, due to natural disasters like floods, how to find mould and clean mould safely at the workplace. We'll then move into some FAQs based on questions we received from participants during our live Ask an Inspector online forums in October 2022, and we'll finish up with some additional resources you may find helpful. The 2022 Eastern Australian floods were one of the nation's worst recorded flood disasters, with a series of floods that occurred in southeast Queensland and parts of coastal New South Wales, devastating communities, cities and towns across the state. Mould can start growing as quickly as just a day or two after a building has been flooded, so it is important to remove floodwater and clean the area as soon as possible. Floods create perfect conditions for mould to grow, especially under floor coverings or within wall cavities of the rooms where flooding occurred. Not only does floodwater create the right environment for mould, but it may also bring it into your property, creating a problem starting in the lower structures of your building. Mould in the workplace can be a serious health and safety hazard that could put workers at risk. Mould requires immediate remediation, even if it doesn't appear to be causing harm. As cleanups took place, it became important for businesses to ensure safe work practices, including mitigating a worker's exposure to mould. The Mould at Work campaign was promoted from the 26th of May to the 24th of June 2022 via Facebook in response to the devastating floods that occurred from February to April that year. The campaign was designed to alert businesses, property owners and workers to the additional health and safety risk of exposure to mould while involved in cleanup operations, working in and around flood-affected areas, or returning to the workplace following receding floodwaters. Here's a summary of the Mould at Work campaign. As mentioned previously, the campaign ran for a month in 2022 with 90,800 people seeing the ads. The campaign ran at the time when several local communities were involved in cleanup operations of their cities and towns after flooding, and mould was identified as a risk during this time. As the flood risk over the Eastern Australian coastline is likely to continue in the near future due to the La Nina weather phenomenon, SafeWork New South Wales is continuing to focus on increasing awareness and educating persons conducting a business or undertaking, such as employers and property owners, through this webinar about the health and safety risk mould presents. For those attending the webinar who are not familiar with work health and safety or WHS terminology, we'll discuss a couple of key points now before moving through the rest of the slides. A person conducting a business or undertaking, or PCBU, which was mentioned in the previous slide, is a broad term used in work health and safety legislation to describe all forms of modern working arrangements, which we commonly refer to as businesses. For example, public and private companies, sole traders and self-employed people, government departments and authorities like us, schools, associations with one or more workers, etc. As a PCBU, you have a responsibility under the work health and safety legislation to ensure the health and safety of your workers while they are at work, so far as is reasonably practicable. More detailed information can be found on our website to help you understand what is meant by the term reasonably practicable. In simple terms, it means doing what you are reasonably able to do to ensure the health and safety of your workers. This includes identifying, managing, and controlling any health and safety risks associated with your business operations. A health and safety risk is the possibility harm, such as injury or illness, might occur when exposed to a hazard. Protecting workers from exposure to mould contamination at the workplace would be a reasonably practicable course of action to take, whether the mould growth is a result of something occurring internally within a workplace, like a water leak, or something external to a workplace, such as a flood. A person who performs work for a PCBU is considered a worker. This could be an employee, a contractor or subcontractor, an employee of a labour hire company working for the PCBU, an outworker, an apprentice or trainee, a student gaining work experience, or a volunteer, etc. Workers also have responsibilities under the work health and safety legislation and must take reasonable care of their own health and safety and that of other persons, comply with any reasonable instructions, and cooperate with any reasonable policy or procedure of the PCBU relating to health or safety that has been notified to them. It's worth noting that a PCBU's duty also extends to other persons at the workplace. For example, contractors, customers, visitors, or members of the public, and a PCBU must not put them at risk so far as is reasonably practicable from work carried out as part of the conduct of the business or undertaking. Other persons at the workplace also have similar responsibilities to that of workers and would be expected to follow any reasonable instructions given by the PCBU for health and safety reasons. In some circumstances, and as defined in the WHS regulation, Clause 5 definitions, there are specific requirements for the qualifications that a competent person in some industries must hold to conduct a particular type of work. If you require more detailed information about competent person requirements, this can be found on our website. The WHS regulation defines a competent person for any other case as a person who has acquired through training, qualification or experience the knowledge and skills to carry out the task. The competency of a person becomes relevant when deciding who can clean mould contamination at your workplace. Can one of your own workers do this, or do you need to outsource this to professionals who specialise in mould remediation work? And what if air sampling of mould is required? We'll provide more information on this as we move through the rest of the slides and during the Q&A session later. So what is mould? Mould's a naturally occurring organism that's present virtually everywhere, both indoors and outdoors. It's an important part of the ecosystem, with its primary function being to break down dead organisms. Mould spores are microscopic and can often only be seen if a colony or mould growth has formed. Mould sometimes looks like soot or dirt stuck to walls, window frames and ceilings, so it's easy to mistake mould in a building for surface dirt. Some moulds appear white and thread-like, while others appear in clusters of black, dark green, grey or brown rings or spots. Not all moulds produce an odour. However, if they did, it could be described as a musty type of odour, something similar to wet socks, and it can be virtually any colour depending on its food source. If you or your workers notice visible mould or a mouldy odour, this is a good indication that mould is growing somewhere in a building and should be investigated. To replicate, mould produces tiny particles called spores, which are carried through the air until they settle on a surface, and under the right conditions, mould begins to grow. In buildings, for example, mould can be found on ceilings, floors, walls, storage areas, and in cupboards. It can be hidden under carpets, floor tiles, roof cavities, or behind wall cabinets. Mould loves warm, damp areas like bathrooms, especially showers, bathtubs, sinks, and tile grout, which is often where you can find visible mould. Most people have been exposed to mould during their lifetime, as there is always a little mould in the air and on many surfaces. Mould can be inhaled, ingested, or it can enter the body through skin contact. Mould spores and their toxins can travel through the air and be inhaled when breathing in or ingested by eating food that is contaminated with mould. It's also possible for mould to enter the body through skin contact with contaminated surfaces or items. Having mould at the workplace won't necessarily make workers sick, but it does have the potential to cause certain health issues. Inhaling, ingesting, or touching mould at the workplace may cause an increase in the conditions shown on the slide. If you notice that your workers seem to be suffering an increased incidence of these types of symptoms, where previously this wasn't the case, it might be worthwhile checking the workplace to identify any mould growth. People who are in a general state of good health and don't have a history of respiratory or immunological conditions are unlikely to be affected by mould. Moulds produce millions of airborne spores that can be inhaled. Breathing in mould spores can inflame or irritate airways or trigger an asthma flare-up or an allergic response for susceptible people. People with immune suppression or underlying lung disease are more susceptible to mould infections. People with chronic respiratory disease may experience difficulty breathing when exposed to mould. Health issues caused by mould exposure can range from insignificant to allergic-type symptoms to a more serious illness such as a lung infection in susceptible people. Workers who are sensitive to mould should avoid mould-affected areas at the workplace and notify the PCBU as soon as possible to allow the PCBU to investigate the mould issue and take appropriate action. In general, mould growth is prevented by following the key points on the slide. For example, check plumbing systems for leaks and undertake water repairs promptly to prevent water damage, provide adequate drainage around the building and check the drains are working, provide ventilation where showers, dryers, or other processes releasing water vapour are used. Where people need to shower or change at work, provide a place where they can hang up damp towels or clothing. Open windows if you're able to, and doors between rooms or roller doors in factory areas, as this will improve cross-ventilation. Dehumidifiers remove moisture from the air, helping to prevent mould. Air conditioning systems not only create cool air and circulate it, they also dehumidify the air. Fans increase airflow, which helps to reduce excess moisture, making it more difficult for mould to grow. Control moisture. Mould will become active in the presence of moisture and multiply. Maintain heating, ventilation and air conditioning systems and make sure these are set to the environmental conditions. Maintain the building in good condition. Regular inspections of the building and its furnishings can identify any areas of water damage, excess moisture or mould growth. To prevent mould growth after flooding, clean up and dry out the area as quickly as possible.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And I just want to, I guess with the slide, I just want to reinforce the idea that in relation to mould, there's often a bit of a focus on spore counts and species of the mould. This is useful in some very limited circumstances, and it's far better to concentrate on addressing the factors that allow the mould to get out of control in the first place. So I guess excluding things like floods, using the information that Michelle's mentioned on the slide here will go a lot further to protecting your workplace from excessive mould growth than will measurements or counts after the fact. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Mark. Mould is not always easy to recognise. It often looks like a stain, smudge or discoloration. The most common moulds are black, green or white. However, as mentioned previously, it can be any colour. Mould investigation requires caution since disturbing mouldy areas may spread mould throughout the building. PPE should be available during any mould investigation and used when significant mould growth has been identified. PPE may include coveralls, disposable overalls, a properly fitted P2 mask, gloves and safety goggles. Where there is a strong smell of mould, a properly fitted disposable P2 respirator with a carbon-activated filter layer should be considered. In addition to minimising the inhalation of mould spores, the carbon-activated filter minimises exposure to volatile organic compounds sometimes produced by large areas of mould growth. Where mould is identified in a building, determine the size and extent of the mould damage as well as the source of the moisture or water problem that allowed the mould to grow, as this will need to be rectified. If the source of the mould growth is unclear and people are at risk of health problems, specialist advice may be required to conduct sampling of the mould-affected area by a competent person, such as an occupational hygienist, with the appropriate equipment and PPE. When returning to a building after a flood, be aware of any visible mould or a musty smell. Mould levels are likely to be higher if the building has been flooded for more than 2 days. Also, be aware of other safety issues that may be present when investigating mould growth and implement appropriate control measures. For example, depending on where the mould growth is located in a building, there may be an increased risk of hazardous chemicals, asbestos, confined spaces, electrical hazards, pests, or contaminated floodwaters. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, was mentioned in the previous slide and is any clothing or equipment a worker uses for protection to minimise their exposure to hazards at the workplace, such as goggles, disposable overalls, P2 masks or respirators. As a PCBU, you should always consult with your workers when selecting PPE. When PPE is used at the workplace, a PCBU must provide the PPE to their workers and must not charge them for using this equipment. Make sure that your workers have the correct PPE, it is in good working order, and that they receive appropriate instruction and training on the fit, use and maintenance, and if appropriate, storage of their PPE. Consider the sizing and fit for each worker, as this may vary depending on an individual's physical characteristics. For example, facial features such as beards may interfere with the seal on a mask, rendering the PPE ineffective. In mould cleanup operations, the purpose of PPE is to prevent the inhalation and ingestion of mould spores and to avoid mould contact with the skin or eyes. Appropriate PPE should be provided and worn to protect the worker when investigating, approaching or cleaning an area affected by mould at the workplace. All single-use or disposable PPE must be discarded after use appropriately. Once mould contamination has been identified, fixing the underlying water, excess moisture or ventilation problem is essential, otherwise the mould problem will return. Restrict people from going into the area that is being cleaned, as this will prevent them from coming into contact with mould spores, which can be disturbed during the cleaning process. Provide appropriate PPE to workers who are cleaning the area. This will depend on the size of the area being cleaned and the chemicals used. A small area of mould can be cleaned by a competent person, for example, a worker or cleaner who has been trained in mould cleaning procedures, has appropriate PPE, seals off the area while cleaning is being undertaken, notifies relevant parties, and treats or disposes of any mould contaminated items appropriately as well as the used PPE. As you can see, we've recommended cleaning contaminated areas with water and detergent or a vinegar solution for small areas, as the research suggests this will help kill the mould. Be mindful when selecting cleaning solutions, as some of them may appear to get rid of the mould initially. However, due to the nature of mould, may end up reactivating it again on a surface later. Mould absorbs organic materials, and any cleaning solution that is left on a surface can provide nutrients for the mould, subsequently reactivating it later. Try and clean the mouldy area while it is still wet if possible, as once the mould has dried, there is a greater chance of spreading the mould spores to other surfaces and through the air while cleaning. Once cleaned, dry out the wet area or surface. This will assist with prevention of more mould developing in an area or on a surface. For areas larger than 1 metre squared, we recommend engaging the services of a competent person, such as a qualified mould remediator. A mould remediator is a professional who specialises in cleaning mould.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll just a note on this slide. I can't reiterate enough, I guess, the importance of cleaning up mould while it's still wet. Drying it out before it's killed can cause it to release more spores, and then that creates or potentially creates an even bigger problem next time when the conditions are right, because you then have more spores available. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. In general, it is good practice to wash your hands thoroughly before eating, drinking or smoking, and after the removal of PPE, regardless of the type of work you do. If you think about all of the things at the workplace frequently handled by people, from telephones and door handles to tools, machinery and equipment, it's easy for germs on hands to end up in a person's mouth, especially when they are drinking or eating food, or for germs to stay on your hands when they aren't cleaned properly. In reference to specific workplace tasks and activities, such as cleaning mould, personal hygiene practices are extremely important, as they protect the worker from inadvertently exposing themselves to mould spores through ingestion, inhalation, or through their skin. For example, if a worker has just cleaned up some mould at the workplace, they need to remove and dispose of any PPE used appropriately, and thoroughly wash their hands before they have a drink, before eating their lunch, or perhaps touching their face. As with any work health and safety risk or hazard at the workplace that has been identified, it is important to communicate to workers what actions you are taking, so they know what the next steps or course of action is to resolve the issue. For workplaces more likely to generate humidity due to the nature of the work being undertaken, consider areas where moisture accumulates or condensation is present, and check these on a regular basis to make sure that the systems you have in place are managing the risk of mould growth. Provide training to workers on what mould is, safe work procedures, how to report mould growth, and PPE requirements. This will help workers know what to do if they see mould at the workplace. These key indicators are a good sign that the mould cleanup has been successful. If it's unclear if the mould has been cleaned up, it may be necessary to seek professional advice, such as a competent person, to make this determination, particularly if the mould contamination has infiltrated behind the walls of a building or under the carpet. In this case, a competent person may be a mould remediator or an occupational hygienist. We recommend, if you do engage a competent person to assist with this process, to follow their recommendations and implement any remedial actions they advise to clean the area. Once the mould has been cleaned up, monitor the area routinely to make sure any control measures you have implemented to remove the mould from the area have been effective and the mould hasn't returned. We've provided a lot of information during the webinar today and thought we'd leave you with these key takeaways. Identify. The sooner you identify mould at the workplace, the sooner you can take action to remove it. Allowing mould to grow uncontrollably won't fix the problem, so if your workers or cleaners are reporting mould issues, investigate their concerns and take action. It is much easier to clean up a small area of mould initially than wait until it has covered a surface, section of a wall, infiltrated into carpets or behind wall cavities. Remove. Kill it, clean it, remove it. The point is to get rid of it. The sooner you remove it, the less chance it has to spore and spread to other areas of the workplace and form more colonies. Fix. Fixing the water, moisture or ventilation issue is key. Otherwise, the mould will return. For example, let's say mould has been cleaned off the wall of a bathroom in a workplace. The reason for the mould growth was attributed to a leaking air conditioning unit located in the bathroom. If the leak in the air conditioning unit is not fixed, it will continue to leak and the mould will return. We'll now move into some FAQs based on our live Ask an Inspector forums in October 2022, and I'll ask Mark to provide the responses to some of the questions we had from participants during these forums. Thanks, Mark. Are there any recommendations on how to make up mould cleaning solutions?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so for ease of access to ingredients and obviously better safety while applying those cleaning agents, it's recommended that you use white vinegar 4 parts to 1 part of water, or methylated spirits 4 parts to 1 part of water. And importantly, placing the cleaning agent into a small spray bottle will assist in getting good coverage and overall spread of the cleaning material over the mould. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Mark. In areas of moisture, should filters be fitted to air conditioning units for occupied spaces, for example, classrooms and offices?
Most air conditioning systems are designed to operate with air filters in place all of the time. Such filters in air conditioning systems primarily serve to collect dust and other particulates from the air that's being drawn into the system. While they can collect more mould spores, if the prevailing conditions in the space are suitable for mould growth, they can actually serve as a matrix upon which mould can grow further. So it's not uncommon to see mould growing on these filters where the air is moist and warm. In any case, as mould is endemic and essential within our natural environments, mould spores are generally present in varying amounts in all of the air that we breathe or encounter. It only becomes problematic when excessive growth in a specific area is encouraged by conditions that accelerate growth, such as things you've mentioned, such as moisture, warmth, or lack of air movement. So standard air conditioning filters are excellent at the job that they're intended to do, but they can never remove all of the mould spore load out of a given airspace. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Are air purifiers and dehumidifiers encouraged?
It's another great question. Air purifiers are similar to air conditioners, but with more specific or efficient filtration systems. Like air conditioners, though, it's not practical or possible for an air purifier to completely remove all or even most of the mould spores in a given airspace. Further, I guess importantly, high efficiency particulate air or what we know as HEPA filters used in air purifiers, whilst highly efficient and very good at what they do, may fill up more readily when used in a space with a heavy dust or mould spore load. So I guess dehumidifiers can assist in reducing humidity or moisture in the air, effectively depriving mould of one of its most needed environmental conditions, which is moisture. So while there are many forms of dehumidifiers on the market, I guess a good, quick and simple approach is to use the dry setting on an existing air handling or air conditioning system. Coupled with the improved air movement that this creates, this can have a beneficial effect on reducing moisture that's available to the mould to grow. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Is bathroom mould as dangerous as mould from flooding and water ingress?
Generally speaking, the mould arising in normal bathrooms and the mould arising out of flooding are among the same species groups, and at the point of exposure will have similar effects. The difference is more so around the volume of spores and the larger range of organic pollutants presented by a flood. While bathroom mould can be treated or controlled in an ongoing basis, obviously a flood represents an overwhelming introduction of spores and moisture, commonly followed by a period where there's little ability to start remediating it, and a larger range of associated materials that are likely to be affected by the water in that process. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. How do you dispose of mould contaminated materials?
If the items can't be effectively cleaned, then they should be removed to outdoors and away from the affected space as soon as possible. This is best done, I guess, while they're wet, as we mentioned before, to reduce spreading or transfer of spores from dried material as it's being moved around. So in a flood context, there'll likely be community processes for collecting damaged material, while in a regular setting, such as a workplace or a home, the affected material can simply be placed in normal waste collection bins. If there's any evidence that moisture or mould has impacted or damaged structural components of a building, it's super important that you seek advice from a licensed builder or tradesperson about the structural integrity of the building that's been potentially affected by moisture or mould. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Do air filters help prevent inhaling spores?
The short answer is no, as they can never really control or collect all of the mould spores that you may breathe in. They can reduce the mould spore load for a given airspace, but our exposure to mould occurs across all of our daily activities to varying degrees. So, because mould is endemic to our environment, it's always present somewhere, so no, they can't.
Thanks, Mark. And to what degree do you have to go to ensure workers, cleaners are competent?
That's another good question. So if your own workers are cleaning up the mouldy area, so ideally less than 1 square metre, as you mentioned before, you must provide them with sufficient training, information and supervision to do so. Where the mould growth exceeds around 1 square metre, you should consider a professional provider. You can Google mould remediators online and then ask for references, or you can use a professional association, I guess, as a guide to a potential provider and their competency. Two such professional associations are the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning and Restoration Certification. Their web address is iicrc.org, or the Restoration Industry Association, which is restorationindustry in one word.org. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. How can you manage mould where it is likely to grow because of the design of the workplace always having condensation or moisture?
This is a great example, I guess, of what we refer to as safety by design. So if you know a particular area of your workplace is going to present mould concerns more readily due to some aspect of the work, encouraging humidity, low air movement or excessive moisture or condensation, then you should look to design those features out if you can. For existing locations, either consider whether it's suitable for that kind of work to be done in that location, or identify and control the risk factors that can give rise to the excessive mould growth that we've already talked about. Things to consider are to consider that cold metal or glass surfaces will encourage condensation of atmospheric moisture. Cooking or heating processes may generate steam or warm air, and measures that are in place to control other hazards such as noise dampening or acrylic type enclosures may restrict air movement in a space. To assist architects and designers of buildings, the National Construction Code of the Australian Building Codes Board has published an updated 2023 edition of their Condensation in Buildings Handbook. So you can find that by simply searching NCC Condensation 2023 in Google, and that'll pull up the reference to that document. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. What happens to plant or equipment that has been stored for a period of time within a room with mould? That is, can you still use the plant or equipment?
Impervious components of plants, I guess, such as metal, glass, or ceramic surfaces, are unlikely to support mould growth. However, metal components could suffer from corrosion as a result of the elevated moisture and temperature levels that gave rise to the mould. Organic or permeable materials such as bushes, linings, or coverings may support mould growth and should be cleaned or replaced if they can't be cleaned. And I guess importantly, mould issues aside, where you have plant or equipment that's been stored out of use for a period of time, it's absolutely critical that a competent person inspect it before recommissioning it or operating it again. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark, for providing your responses and answers to those questions. Visit the SafeWork New South Wales website or contact 13 10 50. If you have any questions relating to mould at your workplace, please email us at the contact centre. That's contact@safework.nsw.gov.au. This brings us to the end of today's webinar. We'd like to thank you for your attendance and hope you were able to take something away from the session or the information provided has reinforced your knowledge and understanding of how to manage mould contamination at your workplace.
Finally, although all care has been taken to ensure that the information in this webinar is correct at the time of publication, the laws do change over time, and you need to ensure that you are accessing the most current legislation to ensure that the information is up to date. The information contained in this presentation is provided as a guide and does not necessarily represent the views of SafeWork New South Wales. This webinar is for educational and development purposes only. Thank you for watching this SafeWork New South Wales webinar.